In this video, I'm going to give you 10 years of brutally honest producer advice in 10 minutes. Now, if you don't know me, I'm a top 2% producer with over 120 million streams on the records that I produced, and I made producing my full-time career. Getting to that point actually took a lot of trial and error, so my hope is to save you from that by making this video. One thing that I noticed for me, especially in the beginning, and a lot of other producers, is that we greatly overestimate what can be done in 1 year versus what can actually be done in 10. When I was starting out and I was actually serious about becoming a full-time producer, I thought that I would be able to do it in 3 months. I was working with my friends and I thought that, okay, if we just make songs, people are automatically gonna love those songs. We're just gonna make them, we're gonna post them, and all of a sudden we're gonna blow up and I'm gonna be full-time in just a matter of months. But of course, we went on to drop the songs and then the fucking songs gets like 100 views at best. And I first of all got very disappointed, but I also got very discouraged because I realized, okay, this was not as easy as I thought. Is it always going to be this hard? Should I just quit right here, right now? Now, however, I did eventually go full time, right? But what I did learn was that the quote unquote success that I was hoping for wasn't just from doing a couple actions or just doing the right stuff a couple of times. It's 1,000 tiny actions that you do over and over again on a daily basis that eventually compounds. And that's when you get what looks to most people like overnight success, right? So what I would tell my 19-year-old self in this scenario is that you want to go in with the mindset that you're going to do this for 10 years, no matter if it pays off or not. By going in with that mindset, you're just going to put your head down, you're going to start grinding and just executing on the necessary tasks that you need to do. And then by doing that, those tasks will compound and you will eventually get the result that you're hoping for. And that is why lesson number 1 is just to give yourself more time to succeed. Now, lesson number 2 is something that I'm insanely guilty of. I'm still guilty of it sometimes till this day. And from talking to a lot of producers, I know that they're also guilty of this as well. We're not progressing because we're over preparing. Now, what over preparing looks like is binge watching tutorials without actually taking action on the stuff they say in the tutorials because you're looking to learn. What it also looks like is figuring out a perfect plan, perfect strategy, and you sit down and you write out this perfect plan of exactly what you're gonna do and how you're gonna do it and who you're gonna reach out to in which order. And I've done that too, but I always ended up changing the plans and never following the strategies that I outlined for myself. And the reason that the strategies and plans that I made for myself never actually really worked out was because I was creating these plans and these strategies without any actual experience, which just means that these plans and strategies, they're not actually plans and strategies. They're just theory. It's just a theory I have in my mind of what I think will actually happen. Then once I got out of my own head into the real world and started taking action, I noticed that my theories were just wrong. And because of that, I couldn't follow them. And all of that time that I spent getting all of my ducks in a row, devising the perfect plan, it could have literally just been spent on taking action and learning as I went. And that is why lesson number 2, which is one of the most valuable lessons I ever learned in my entire life, is to start and then learn. So you start doing the things and you learn on the way. Now, lesson 3 was a really tough pill for me to swallow. Pause. But it was really hard for me to get over. What most producers do, and what I did, is that we get into producing for the love of the music, right? And then because we love it so much, we of course want to make a living doing what we love. However, when I started pursuing my passion as a career, I noticed that it's everything but the music that allows us to make a living doing what we love. Because you have to do all of these other things. You have to think about branding, you have to think about networking. There's a lot of things outside of music that actually makes it possible to have a career with music. For a lot of us, those are the same exact things that we don't want to do. And we don't want to do them because either A, it's really boring, and we got into music because it was fun in the first place, or B, it's scary because it's uncomfortable. Sending outreaches to people is uncomfortable. Getting in studio sessions when you've never done it before is uncomfortable. I avoided the scary and uncomfortable things, and it went to such an extreme that I wasted an entire year building a catalog of 700 beats that actually nobody ended up using because I was so scared of doing the uncomfortable and boring stuff. But it wasn't until I started doing those things and actually doing more of those things that I started to see progress being made. So lesson 3 is just to embrace the boring and uncomfortable work that actually needs doing. Now, another thing that held me back and that I see holds a lot of other producers back as well is that we're not being respectful of our own time and our own energy. I worked a 9 to 5, I was making music on top of that, But instead of just doing those two things, I had a lot of other things also stealing my energy throughout the day. Of course, shit like doom scrolling, playing video games, all of that dumb stuff, but also things like having negative, stressful, and draining relationships. And what happened was that all of those things were taking up so much mental headspace that I had very little mental headspace left to actually focus on music and focus towards reaching my actual goals. And I actually had to put in some effort into looking at what was taking up space in my mind, in my day, that I could remove so that I would have enough time and enough energy to actually pursue my goals. So lesson 4 is to be mindful and preserve your energy. Now, lesson 5 is actually a big one. And lesson 5 is what allowed me to make my first record that hit number 6 on the Spotify top 50 charts. So what I used to do was that I used to blame outside circumstances for my lack of results. So an example of that was that I made a song with an artist and I felt like, okay, this is a smash, it's gonna blow up, whatever. However, it didn't. The song dropped and it got like 30k streams in the first day, and then it slowly tapered off. That might sound good, but it wasn't what I had in mind for that song. I was thinking top 50 charts, millions and millions of streams. So the first thing I did was that I started blaming all kinds of things. So I started blaming the playlist curators. I started blaming the marketing. I started blaming a bunch of different things for why this record wasn't what I thought it would be. However, then I thought, okay, those are all things that are outside of my control. I can't control what the playlist curators are doing. I can't control the marketing. That's not my role. I'm the producer. So what can I do to make sure that this doesn't happen again? And when I did that, I realized that, for example, if I understand what's going on the charts and what's trending and working, I will be able to make music that does that. So I started breaking down and analyzing the top 50 charts. I went back to the drawing board with my production and I really practiced and I analyzed and I broke down what kind of sound selection they were using, how I could incorporate that into my production. Now, the funniest thing happened after that, and that is that the next song I did with the same artist, that song got on the number 6 spot on its Spotify top 50 chart, simply because I stopped blaming outside circumstances and just looked at myself and thought, okay, what can I do better? So lesson 5 here is that if it's not working, it's a skill issue and you just gotta get better. Now, lesson 6 actually came to me at the same time as lesson 5 did. And the reason they happened at the same time is because I greatly underestimated the amount of work, reps, and improvement required to get better. What I used to think was that I could half-ass songs, half-ass beat making, half-ass networking, and it would still work out. Because I thought like, okay, as long as I do the actions right, and I do a lot of them, then it's gonna work. But it didn't, because just going through the motions and doing the actions isn't enough. You also need to start doing them well, and that was what I wasn't doing at that point. Now, just to give you context, to go from where I made a record that flopped to making the record that went number 6 on the charts, I literally went back and I learned to play the keys in a very basic fashion, but I learned to play the keys. I learned basic music theory. Then I spent 1 hour a day just listening to the top 50 charts to understand what was going on. Then I spent probably another hour to 2 hours every day breaking down the chord progressions, using songs on there as references, recreating songs just so that I could actually understand what was going on. And what I did there was that I basically 10x my effort. And when I 10x my effort, I 10x my results. And lesson 6 is that it takes way more work and way more effort than you actually think. Now, the last and final lesson, lesson number 7, kind of ties into this. I talked to a lot of producers and we have a tendency, me included, I was also thinking about this before, but we have a tendency to either switch up what we're doing drastically or quitting when things get really hard. So at a point in time, I literally lived inside of a studio. I did nothing else but to make beats, take studio sessions, sleep in the studio, wake up, go to my 9 to 5, back to the studio, repeat. And that's all I did for literally 1 year. However, I was not getting any major results for the work that I was putting in. And at that point, I was really questioning myself. I was this close to quitting. But I decided to push through just a little bit longer. And then after that year, that's when I had my first record on the top 50 charts at number 25. And what I noticed, and you probably heard other people say this as well, is that things get really hard right before they get better. Pause. But it gets really difficult right before when it's about to get better. Some people say it's the universe giving you a sign. I don't know about that. But what I think it is, at least in my experience, is that when things are really difficult, you feel pain. And pain forces you to seek improvement because you want to get out of that pain. So You just repeat the same actions over and over again, and you're not seeing any results from it. And the pain from doing that is going to cause you to try and do things in a different way, because it's really not fun to do the same thing over and over again without seeing any results for it. So what I believe is that when you have this like huge down period where everything just sucks, it actually forces you to build up the resilience and skill level needed to succeed. And that is why when you're in the slump, you figure out the solutions to so many things and you get so much better because you have to, that you're able to figure out ways to get more for what you put in, and because of that you eventually see the success that you want. So lesson number 7 is to don't quit when things get hard, stay in the game and give yourself a chance.